I never expected to find evidence of my husband's betrayal while changing his father's bedsheets. But there it was, Douglas's phone lighting up with a message from someone saved as CB, saying, "Missing you already, can't wait for tonight." My name is Holly, and for the past 8 months, I've been the primary caregiver for my father-in-law, Leon. He's dying of pancreatic cancer, and we moved him into our guest room so I could give him the round-the-clock care he needs. Douglas claimed his work schedule was too demanding to help, but somehow he found time for other activities. "Holly, dear?" Leon's weak voice called from the bed. "Is everything all right? You've been staring at that phone for quite a while?" I quickly placed Douglas's phone back on the nightstand, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine, Leon. Just got lost in thought. How about some fresh water?" "You're a terrible liar," Leon chuckled, then winced from the pain. "But you're the kindest soul I know. Douglas never deserved you." I adjusted his pillows, pretending I hadn't heard that last part. "The hospice nurse will be here in an hour. Would you like to rest until then?" "What I'd like is for you to sit and talk with me." He patted the edge of the bed. "Tell me what's troubling you." I sat down, my hands fidgeting with his blanket. "Douglas hasn't been home before midnight all week. He says it's work, but you're not stupid," Leon finished for me, "and neither am I." Just then my phone buzzed. It was Olivia. "Coffee emergency. Need to see you ASAP." "Go," Leon insisted before I could decline. "Ethan's at school and the nurse will be here soon. I'm not going anywhere." "Are you sure?" "Positive. Besides, you need someone to talk to who isn't an old man stuck in bed." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Olivia at our usual cafe. Her eyes widened as I showed her the message I'd found. "That snake," she hissed. "Have you confronted him?" "Not yet. I need to be smart about this, especially with Leon's condition and Ethan to think about." Speaking of Ethan, where is my favorite 7-year-old today? School field trip to the Science Museum. He was so excited this morning, wouldn't stop talking about the dinosaur exhibit. Olivia reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Holly, you need to document everything. Messages, late nights, any suspicious charges on shared accounts. My cousin Kenneth is a divorce attorney." "Divorce? I haven't even confronted Douglas yet." "And you shouldn't, not until you're prepared. Men like Douglas, they don't just have affairs, they plan exits. Trust me, I've seen this before." My phone buzzed again. The hospice nurse was running late. I needed to get back to Leon. "Think about it," Olivia insisted as we hugged goodbye. "I'll send you Kenneth's number, just in case." When I returned home, I found Leon watching old family videos on the small TV in his room. On screen, a 5-year-old Ethan was opening Christmas presents while Douglas recorded, his voice warm with genuine love and pride. "He was a good father then," Leon commented. "Before the promotion, before the money went to his head." I busied myself organizing Leon's medications. "He's still a good father." "Is he? When was the last time he attended one of Ethan's soccer games? Or helped with homework?" Before I could answer, we heard the front door open. Douglas's voice carried up the stairs. "Holly, are you home?" "Up here!" I called back, my heart racing as I remembered the message on his phone. Douglas appeared in the doorway, looking irritated. "Why aren't you answering your phone? I've been trying to reach you." "I was getting coffee with Olivia. Is everything okay?" "I need you to pick up Ethan today. I have an important client dinner." Leon cleared his throat. "On a Tuesday? Must be some client." Douglas shot his father a cold look. "Some of us still have to work, Dad." I stepped between them, diffusing the tension. "Of course I'll pick up Ethan. He'll want to tell me all about the dinosaurs anyway." As Douglas turned to leave, Leon called out, "Son, when you have a minute, we need to discuss some changes I'm making to my will." Douglas paused, his back stiffening. "Whatever you want, Dad. We can talk later." After he left, Leon motioned me closer. "Holly, there's something you need to know. Something that might help you when the time comes." "When what time comes?" "When Douglas shows his true colors. And trust me, dear, that time is coming sooner than you think." The family dinner was my idea, a desperate attempt to bring us together like we used to be. Douglas actually agreed, probably because his father insisted on paying for catering from his favorite restaurant. I watched my husband pick at his salmon while Ethan chatted excitedly about his dinosaur adventure. And then we saw this huge T-Rex skeleton, Ethan demonstrated with his fork. Mom, it was taller than our house. That's wonderful, sweetheart, I smiled, then turned to Douglas. Maybe this weekend we could all go see it together? Douglas didn't look up from his phone. Can't. Working. On Saturday? Leon's voice carried an edge I rarely heard. The market's closed on weekends, son. What kind of financial planning requires weekend hours? Dad, the world doesn't stop for weekends anymore. Some of us have to... Have to what? Leon interrupted. Miss your son growing up? Abandon your family responsibilities? The tension in the room thickened. Ethan stopped mid-bite, looking between his father and grandfather. Ethan, honey, I intervened. Why don't you go play your new video game, the one Grandpa got you? Once Ethan was upstairs, Douglas stood abruptly. I have calls to make. Sit down, Leon commanded. Despite his illness, his voice still carried the authority of a man who'd built an empire. Holly, would you give us a moment? I started clearing plates, but Leon caught my wrist. No, stay. You're family. More family than some who share my blood. Douglas sank back into his chair, jaw clenched. If this is about the will again, it's about honor, Leon cut in. About the promises we make and keep. Your mother and I raised you to understand that family comes first, but lately... He paused, coughing violently. I rushed to get his medication while Douglas just sat there watching. I'm fine. Leon waved off my concern after taking his pills. Douglas, do you remember what I told you the day Holly agreed to marry you? Dad, please. I said she was too good for you, that you'd better spend every day proving me wrong. Leon's eyes met mine. I've never been so sorry to be right. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. Kenneth can see you tomorrow at 2. Don't tell Douglas. If we're done with the lecture, Douglas stood again. I have work to finish. Your father isn't finished, I said quietly, surprising myself. Douglas turned to me, eyes narrow. Since when do you speak for my father? Since she's the only one who's been here. Leon's voice boomed through the room. Where were you when I needed to be driven to chemotherapy? When I couldn't keep food down? When I couldn't even get out of bed? I was earning a living. You were earning a life without consequences, Leon corrected. But consequences always catch up, son. Always. Douglas's phone chimed. He glanced at it, and I caught the flash of a smile before he masked it. I need some air, he announced, heading for the door. It's Cassandra, isn't it? Leon called after him. Douglas froze. That young associate from your office? The one you've been mentoring? I felt the floor shift beneath me. Cassandra, CB. The pieces clicked into place. You don't know what you're talking about, Douglas muttered. I know everything, Leon replied. I may be dying, but I'm not blind. Holly, dear, would you help me to my room? I think I've lost my appetite. Once I had Leon settled in bed, he gripped my hand with surprising strength. I'm sorry you had to hear it like that. I've been watching him destroy everything good in his life, and I couldn't stay silent anymore. How long have you known? About Cassandra? A few weeks. One of my old colleagues saw them together at a restaurant in the city, but I've known Douglas was slipping away far longer. He reached for the drawer beside his bed. There's something I need you to keep safe. Something that will protect you and Ethan when the time comes. Leon, I don't want... This isn't about want, dear. It's about need. About justice. He pressed an envelope into my hands. Don't open it yet. Wait until you have no other choice. Promise me. I tucked the envelope into my pocket. I promise. Good girl. Now go check on my grandson. He shouldn't be alone right now. I found Ethan in his room, headphones on, lost in his game. When he saw me, he pulled them off. Is Dad mad at me? No, baby. Why would you think that? Because he never wants to do anything with us anymore. I pulled him close, fighting back tears. That's his loss, not yours. Never yours. Over his head, I heard the front door slam, Douglas leaving again, probably to meet Cassandra. But for the first time, I didn't feel hurt or angry. I felt ready. Kenneth's office smelled like leather and coffee. Olivia sat beside me as her cousin reviewed the documentation I'd gathered. Photos of Douglas's late-night departures, credit card statements showing dinners for two, and hotel charges. "This is good," Kenneth nodded, "but we need more. Has your father-in-law made any official statements about his estate?" He gave me this. I pulled out the sealed envelope, but I promised not to open it yet. "Keep that promise," Kenneth advised. "Timing is everything in cases like this." My phone buzzed, a text from the hospice nurse. Leon was having a rough morning. "I have to go." I stood quickly. "Leon needs me." "Holly," Kenneth called as I reached the door, "document everything Leon tells you. His testimony could be crucial." I rushed home to find Leon more alert than he'd been in days, sitting up in bed with old photographs spread across his lap. "Come here." He patted the bed beside him. "There's something you need to understand about Douglas." I sat down, picking up a photo of a teenage Douglas with his mother. She was beautiful. Sarah was everything to him. Leon's voice softened. When she died, something in Douglas broke. He was 17, angry at the world, especially me. Said I worked too much. Wasn't there enough? He never mentioned that. No, he wouldn't. Just like he never mentions how I paid for his gambling debts in college or the sexual harassment settlement at his first job. Leon's hands trembled as he sorted through more photos. I enabled him, Holly. Cleaned up his messes, hoping he'd learn. Instead, he just got better at hiding his mistakes. A coughing fit seized him. I helped him sip water until it passed. "The company," he continued. "I never wanted him to have control. Sarah made me promise to protect our legacy, to ensure it would help people, not just make money. Douglas. He'd destroy everything we built." "Is that what the envelope is about?" Leon nodded. "Partly. I've arranged for the board to retain control. Douglas will have a position, but no authority to make major decisions." He gripped my hand. "The rest is for you and Ethan. I've seen how Douglas handles money. He'd burn through Ethan's inheritance in years." My phone buzzed again. Douglas, demanding to know where I was. I ignored it. "There's more," Leon continued. "The harassment case. The woman signed an NDA, but I kept copies of everything. Douglas doesn't know. If he tries to take Ethan from you..." "I'd never use that," I protested. "It would destroy him." "Sometimes people need to be destroyed before they can rebuild." Leon's eyes were fierce. "Promise me you'll protect my grandson, whatever it takes." Before I could respond, we heard the front door slam. "Holly!" Douglas's voice boomed from downstairs. "Where are you?" "Up here," I called back, quickly helping Leon gather the photos. Douglas burst into the room, face flushed. "Why aren't you answering your phone? And why were you at a lawyer's office?" "You had me followed?" "Answer the question." Leon's hand found mine. "Lower your voice in my room, son. Stay out of this, Dad. Holly, if you're planning what I think you're planning..." "You'll what?" I stood, surprising myself with my calm. "What will you do, Douglas? Tell everyone what a terrible wife I am while you're out with Cassandra." He stepped back like I'd slapped him. "Who told you?" "I did," Leon interrupted. "And I'll tell the whole world if you don't start behaving like the man I tried to raise you to be." Douglas's face darkened. "You're dying, Dad. You don't get to control me anymore." "No," Leon agreed. "But I get to protect what matters. Now get out of my room." After Douglas stormed out, I sank back onto the bed, shaking. "Well done," Leon squeezed my hand. "The first step is always the hardest." "He'll try to take Ethan," my voice cracked. "He'll use his money, his connections." "He'll try," Leon agreed. "But money isn't everything, dear. Truth is stronger than gold." He reached for his bedside drawer again. "There's one more thing you need to see." He pulled out another envelope, this one already opened. "These are copies of documents proving Douglas has been embezzling from the company. Small amounts, well hidden, but enough to ruin him if exposed. Keep them with the other envelope." "Leon, I can't..." "You can and you will. Not for revenge, but for justice. For Ethan." He pressed the envelope into my hands. "Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is let someone face the consequences of their actions." I tucked both envelopes into my bag just as my phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Douglas just called Kenneth's office. threatening to sue. It's starting. Good, Leon said when I showed him the message. Let him show his hand first. The higher he builds his house of cards, the harder it will fall. The divorce papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, right after I'd helped Leon with his breakfast. The courier looked apologetic as I signed for them, like he knew he was delivering a bomb wrapped in legal paperwork. Mom, Ethan called from the kitchen. Can you help me with my science project? Just a minute, honey. I tucked the envelope under my arm and found him surrounded by construction paper and glue sticks. I'm making a solar system. He held up a wobbly paper Saturn. Dad promised to help, but he's busy, I finished, swallowing the lump in my throat. Tell you what, let me make a quick call and then we'll make this the best solar system ever. I stepped into the hallway and called Kenneth. He's requesting full custody, Kenneth said after I described the papers. Claims your dedication to Leon's care has made you neglectful of Ethan's needs. Neglectful? My voice cracked. I'm the only one who's here, who takes him to school, helps with homework, goes to every soccer game. I know, we'll fight this. But Holly, there's something else. Leon passed away an hour ago. The world tilted sideways. What? No, I just gave him breakfast. He was fine. The hospice called Douglas first. I'm sorry you had to hear it from me. I slid down the wall, papers scattering across the floor. Does Ethan know? Douglas is on his way to tell him. Holly, listen carefully. Don't leave the house. Douglas's lawyer will try to claim you fled with Ethan. Stay put. Document everything. The front door opened. Douglas walked in, followed by a young woman in a sleek business suit, Cassandra. My husband had brought his mistress to tell our son about his grandfather's death. Daddy! Ethan ran to hug him. Douglas patted his head absently. Son, we need to talk. Douglas glanced at me. Privately. Anything you need to tell him, you can say in front of me. I stood my ground. Fine. Douglas knelt before Ethan. Grandpa Leon went to heaven this morning. He's not suffering anymore. Ethan's face crumpled. But I didn't say goodbye. You saw him at breakfast, I reminded him gently. Remember? He helped you practice spelling. Actually, Cassandra stepped forward. Douglas and I thought it might be good for Ethan to spend some time at our new apartment. Help him process everything. Your apartment? I turned to Douglas. You moved in with her? Holly, don't make this difficult, Douglas warned. The papers have been served. This is happening. Ethan looked between us, confused and frightened. Mom? Go pack your backpack, honey. I kept my voice steady. But only your backpack. You're coming back home tonight. The hell he is, Douglas growled after Ethan left. My lawyer's already filed for emergency custody. Based on what grounds? Based on your obsession with my father's care affecting our son's welfare, Cassandra answered smoothly. Plus your recent erratic behavior, consulting divorce attorneys behind Douglas's back. I laughed, surprising them both. You really don't know what's in those envelopes, do you? What envelopes? Douglas demanded. The ones Leon left me. The ones that detail everything. The embezzlement, the harassment settlement, all of it. Douglas's face paled. You're bluffing. Am I? Should we open them and find out? Maybe share them with the board members at tomorrow's emergency meeting? There's no emergency meeting, Douglas scoffed. My phone buzzed. An email from the board secretary, copying me on the meeting notice. I held it up for Douglas to see. Leon made some changes before he died, I explained. Big changes. Changes that affect both the company and his personal estate. Cassandra touched Douglas's arm. She's trying to manipulate you. Don't listen. No, I corrected her. I'm trying to protect my son. Douglas, you have one chance to do this right. One chance to be the father Ethan deserves. Walk away now, and what's in these envelopes stays private. You're threatening me? With my own father's death not even cold? I'm offering you a choice, more than you gave me. Ethan came back downstairs, backpack clutched to his chest. I'm ready. Douglas reached for him, but I stepped between them. Not tonight. Tonight we grieve as a family, the family Leon loved. Tomorrow our lawyers can sort out the rest. This isn't over, Douglas snarled, but I saw the fear in his eyes. No, I agreed, but it will be soon. And Douglas, Leon knew everything, every lie, every betrayal. That's why he trusted me with the truth, and with Ethan's future. After they left, I held Ethan while he cried for his grandfather. My phone kept buzzing. Olivia, Kenneth, the hospice, the funeral home. But for now, nothing mattered except the little boy in my arms and the promise I'd made to a dying man who'd loved him more than money or power. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. Tonight was for remembering and preparing for what came next. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Douglas sat across the aisle with Cassandra and his lawyer, both of them wearing matching charcoal suits like they'd coordinated their wardrobes. Olivia squeezed my hand as the judge entered. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Douglas's lawyer spoke first, painting a picture of me as an unstable woman obsessed with my father-in-law's care at the expense of my marriage and child. I kept my face neutral, just as Kenneth had advised. "Your Honor," Douglas's lawyer continued, "Mr. Kennedy is a respected financial executive who can provide the stable home environment his son needs during this difficult transition." "Stable?" Kenneth stood. "Is that what we're calling moving in with a mistress while your father is dying?" "Objection!" Douglas's lawyer shot up. "Counsel is attempting to prejudice the court with irrelevant personal matters." "Overruled," the judge leaned forward. "I believe the defendant's living situation is quite relevant to the child's welfare." Douglas took the stand next, his voice practiced and smooth. "I love my son, Your Honor. Holly's been distracted. Ethan needs structure, attention. Just last week, she missed his soccer game because she was meeting with lawyers." "That's a lie." I couldn't help myself. Kenneth touched my arm, warning me to stay quiet. "Mrs. Kennedy," the judge turned to me, "would you like to address these allegations?" I stood, hands trembling but voice steady. "Yes, Your Honor. I have documentation of every soccer game, school event, and doctor's appointment I've attended, alone, for the past year. I also have evidence of Mr. Kennedy's absences, including credit card statements showing where he actually was during those times." Douglas's lawyer jumped up again. "Your Honor, these unsubstantiated accusations are fully substantiated," Kenneth interrupted, producing a thick folder, "including signed statements from Ethan's teachers, coach, and the hospice nurses who witnessed Mr. Kennedy's absence during his own father's illness." The judge reviewed the documents while Douglas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Cassandra whispered something in his ear, but he shook her off. "Mr. Kennedy," the judge looked up, "can you explain these hotel charges on nights you claim to be working late?" That is... Douglas loosened his tie. "My work requires travel. 2 hotels 20 minutes from your office?" I stood again. "Your Honor, if I may?" The judge nodded. "Before he died, Leon Kennedy left me 2 letters. I'd like to read the first one now." Douglas's face went white. "Objection. Any such letters would be hearsay." The letters were notarized and witnessed. Kenneth produced the envelope. "They're admissible, Your Honor." "Proceed, Mrs. Kennedy." My hands shook as I broke the seal, but my voice remained clear. "My dearest Holly, if you're reading this, I've passed on, and Douglas has done exactly what I feared he would. He's trying to take Ethan, isn't he? Using his money and connections to paint you as unfit? Let me set the record straight. Over the past year, while Holly cared for me day and night, I watched my son abandon his family. I documented every absence, every lie. The attached records showed Douglas embezzled company funds to finance his affair with Cassandra Burns, a fact the board will be very interested to learn. But more importantly, I've witnessed Holly's dedication to my grandson. While Douglas missed soccer games for secret rendezvous, Holly was there. While he spent thousands at hotels with his mistress, Holly helped with homework and nursed me through my darkest days. I'm leaving control of the company to the board, not Douglas. And my personal estate, including this house, goes to Holly in trust for Ethan. Douglas forfeited his inheritance the moment he betrayed his family's trust. Love, always and forever, Leon Kennedy. The courtroom fell silent. Douglas's lawyer frantically whispered in his ear while Cassandra stared at the floor. "Your Honor," Kenneth stood, "we have the second letter as well, containing detailed financial records." "That won't be necessary," Douglas interrupted, standing abruptly. I I withdraw my petition for custody. Mr. Kennedy, the judge's voice was sharp, are you sure this decision is final? Douglas wouldn't meet my eyes. Holly can have primary custody. I just want reasonable visitation. Mrs. Kennedy, the judge turned to me. Do you agree to reasonable visitation rights? I thought of Ethan, of how much he still loved his father despite everything. Yes, Your Honor. Supervised visits, at least initially. So ordered. The gavel struck with finality. Court adjourned. As we left the courtroom, Douglas caught my arm. The second letter. What's in it? Insurance, I replied quietly. Stay clean, be a better father, and you'll never have to find out. Olivia hugged me as we walked out into the sunlight. You did it! No, I smiled, thinking of Leon. We did it. All of us. My phone buzzed. A text from the babysitter. Ethan's asking when you'll be home. Soon, I typed back. Tell him everything's going to be okay now. And for the first time in months, I truly believed it would be. The board meeting started exactly 1 hour after the court session ended. I sat in Leon's old chair at the head of the table, the second envelope heavy in my hands. Douglas slouched in his seat across from me, his usual confidence shattered. Before we begin, I addressed the room of stern-faced executives. I want to read something Leon prepared for this moment. This is ridiculous, Douglas stood up. She has no authority here. Actually, Kenneth stepped forward, placing a document on the table. As trustee of Leon's estate and temporary custodian of his voting shares, she has every authority. The board members murmured amongst themselves as I broke the seal on the second envelope. Douglas sank back into his chair, loosening his tie. My fellow board members, I read Leon's words clearly. If you're hearing this, I've passed on, and my son has likely made a mess of things. The documents attached to this letter will show systematic embezzlement through a series of shell companies, all traced back to Douglas's personal accounts. That's a lie! Douglas slammed his fist on the table. The evidence is quite detailed. Kenneth began distributing copies of bank statements and transaction records. Your father was thorough in his investigation. I continued reading. But this isn't just about money. This company was built on trust, integrity, and family values. My late wife Sarah and I created something meant to last generations, to serve our community. Douglas has betrayed not just his family, but everything this company stands for. The board members flipped through the documents, their faces growing darker with each page. Mr. Kennedy, the senior board member finally spoke, these transactions, they're quite substantial. I can explain, Douglas started, but his voice cracked. Please do, another board member challenged. Explain the offshore accounts, the falsified expense reports, the unauthorized bonuses to certain employees. His eyes flicked to where Cassandra sat in the corner, her face ashen. I kept reading. I'm not asking you to destroy my son. I'm asking you to save him from himself, strip him of his executive position, remove his voting rights, let him earn back his place through honest work, if he's capable. This is all her fault, Douglas pointed at me. She manipulated my father when he was sick, turned him against me. Your father wasn't manipulated, Kenneth produced another document. He had 3 separate psychiatric evaluations confirming his mental competency when he made these decisions. The board needs to vote, the senior member announced. All in favor of removing Douglas Kennedy from his executive position and suspending his voting rights, pending a full investigation. Hands rose around the table. Douglas watched his empire crumble, one vote at a time. This isn't over, he threatened. Standing so abruptly, his chair toppled backward. Actually, I spoke softly, it is. But you still have a chance to be part of Ethan's life. That's what Leon wanted, for you to remember what really matters. Don't you dare speak for my father. Then let him speak for himself. I turned to the final page. Douglas, my son, if you're hearing this, you've lost everything you thought mattered. Good. Maybe now you can rebuild what actually does. Your son needs a father, not a bank account. Your family name needs honor, not power. I'm doing this because I love you enough to let you fall. The question is, do you love yourself enough to get back up? Cassandra stood to leave, avoiding Douglas's reaching hand. Don't, Just don't. After she left, the board began discussing transition plans. Douglas sat silent, staring at his father's empty chair. The company will provide a reasonable salary for an entry-level position, the senior member informed him. If you prove yourself trustworthy, we'll reassess in 1 year. Entry-level? Douglas laughed bitterly. I built half this company. No, I corrected him gently. Leon built it. You just borrowed his legacy. Now you have to build your own. As the meeting ended, Douglas caught my arm. The trust fund, Ethan's inheritance, is safe from both of us, I assured him. Leon made sure of that. It's managed by an independent trustee until Ethan's 25. He thought of everything, didn't he? He thought of everyone, even you, especially you. Walking out of the building, I remembered all the times Leon had told me that true wealth wasn't in bank accounts. I hadn't understood then, but watching Douglas stand alone in the boardroom, stripped of everything except the chance to rebuild, I finally did. My phone buzzed, a text from Olivia. How'd it go? Justice served, I replied. But maybe mercy too. Another text came through, this one from Douglas. Can I see Ethan this weekend? Just for ice cream or something? I smiled, remembering Leon's words about love and second chances. Yes, I typed back. But only if you leave the fancy car at home and actually talk to your son. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you never knew you needed. 3 months after the board meeting, I sat on a park bench watching Douglas push Ethan on the swings. His suit and designer watch were gone, replaced by jeans and a faded t-shirt. The supervised visits had become less awkward each week. Higher, Dad! Ethan squealed, pumping his legs. Not too high, I called out, more from habit than worry. Olivia settled beside me, handing me a coffee. Well, this is different. Remember when he wouldn't be caught dead at a playground? Money changes people, I sipped my coffee. Sometimes having less brings out more. Speaking of money, Olivia lowered her voice. Heard anything from Cassandra? She took a job in another state. Apparently, dating an entry-level data entry clerk wasn't part of her 5-year plan. Douglas helped Ethan off the swing and they headed toward us, my son's face flushed with excitement. Mom, Dad's taking me for ice cream. Can you come too? I glanced at Douglas, who nodded slightly. Sure, honey. Olivia, want to join us? And witness this miracle of modern family dynamics? Wouldn't miss it. The ice cream shop was crowded with weekend customers. Douglas insisted on paying, pulling crumpled bills from his wallet instead of the platinum card he used to flash. How's the new apartment? I asked as Ethan attacked his sundae. Small, quiet. Douglas stirred his vanilla cone absently. Dad would have loved it, actually. Said I needed to learn the value of simplicity. He did love simple things, I agreed. Remember how he'd sit in his garden for hours? The garden, Ethan perked up. Can we plant flowers like Grandpa used to? Your mom's house has the garden, buddy, Douglas reminded him gently. My apartment just has a window box. We could plant something there, I suggested. Maybe start small, like Grandpa taught us. Douglas looked at me sharply. Us? Leon taught me everything about his garden while I cared for him. He said growing things teaches patience. Mom's really good at it, Ethan added proudly. We planted tomatoes last week. Speaking of the house, Douglas shifted uncomfortably. My lawyer sent over the final divorce papers. Olivia tensed beside me, but I stayed calm. Kenneth reviewed them. They're fair. More than fair, Douglas admitted. I wanted to thank you for not using the second letter, for giving me a chance with Ethan. That was Leon's gift to both of us. He knew what really mattered. Ethan, oblivious to the adult undertones, launched into a story about his science project. Douglas listened intently, asking questions, fully present in a way he hadn't been in years. Later, as Douglas walked us to the car, his phone rang. He checked it and grimaced. Everything okay? I asked. Just work. The data entry position, it's not exactly thrilling. But it's honest, I reminded him. That matters to the board, to Ethan. And to you? What matters to me is that our son has a father he can be proud of. Douglas knelt to hug Ethan goodbye. See you next weekend, buddy. Maybe we can start that window garden. After he left, Olivia shook her head in amazement. If someone had told me 3 months ago that Douglas would be planning container gardening, people can surprise you. I watched him walk away, his shoulders straighter despite everything he'd lost. Sometimes they even surprise themselves. Mom? Ethan tugged my sleeve. Is Dad going to be okay? I think so, honey. He's learning what Grandpa tried to teach him all along. That evening, after Ethan was in bed, I found myself in Leon's garden. The tomato plants were thriving, just as he said they would. My phone buzzed with a text from Douglas. Thank you for today. Dad would have liked it. I typed back. He did always say the best growth happens after pruning. Another message came through. Found his old gardening book in a box. Mind if I bring it next weekend? Ethan might like to see it. Leon would love that, I replied, smiling at the memory of the old man teaching me about nurturing roots and cutting away dead growth. Olivia called as I was heading inside. Just checking in. How are you really doing with all this? I looked around the home Leon had left us, at the garden where he'd taught his final lessons, at the photo of Ethan and his grandfather on the wall. I'm good, I answered honestly. Better than good. Leon used to say that revenge is like salting the earth. Nothing good grows after. But justice is like pruning, painful but necessary for new growth. And Douglas is finally growing in the right direction. That's all Leon ever wanted, all any of us wanted. The stars were bright overhead, the garden peaceful in the gathering dusk. Somewhere across town, in a small apartment with a window box, a father was planning to plant seeds with his son. Sometimes, I realized, the best revenge is simply letting go and watching truth take root on its own. The autumn wind scattered leaves across Leon's headstone as I placed fresh flowers beside it. Ethan carefully arranged the small potted plant he'd grown in his father's window box. Do you think Grandpa would like it? He asked, adjusting the miniature roses. He'd love it, I assured him. Remember how he always said roses were the most honest flowers? Because they have thorns? Douglas approached, carrying his own bouquet. Mind if I join you? Ethan hugged his father while I made space for Douglas's flowers. The board meeting that morning had been interesting. Douglas's first presentation since starting in the company's community outreach program. The shelter project was approved, Douglas said quietly, kneeling to brush leaves from his father's name. Full funding for the next 5 years. Leon would be proud. I touched the headstone. It's exactly the kind of project he always wanted the company to support. Mom helped Dad with the presentation, Ethan announced proudly. I heard them practicing on the phone. Douglas smiled, a real smile, not the polished one he used to wear. Your mom knows how to make things grow, even presentations about homeless shelters. Speaking of growing things, I pulled an envelope from my bag. Kenneth dropped this off yesterday, the paperwork for the Garden Foundation. The Leon Kennedy Memorial Gardens would provide green spaces and gardening education in low-income neighborhoods. It was Douglas's idea, born from memories of his father's patient lessons. Will you help? He asked, taking the envelope. The foundation needs a director who understands both gardens and people. I'd like that, I nodded. Ethan's already volunteered to teach kids about composting. Just like Grandpa taught me, Ethan beamed. Dad's learning too. His window box has 3 kinds of flowers now. And only 2 have died, Douglas laughed. Progress, right? We stood together, watching Ethan arrange pebbles around the potted rose. The company logo on Douglas's cheap polyester shirt caught the sunlight. He'd worked his way up to junior outreach coordinator, earning every step. I found some of Dad's old journals, Douglas said softly. He wrote about you, about how you reminded him of Mom. Said you both saw the good in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. He saw good in everyone, I replied, even when they were determined to prove him wrong. I got there eventually. Douglas straightened his name badge. Only took losing everything to figure it out. Not everything, I gestured to Ethan, who was now explaining photosynthesis to the neighboring headstone. You kept what mattered. My phone buzzed, Olivia reminding me about dinner. She'd started dating Kenneth, another of Leon's subtle manipulations from beyond the grave. The foundation meeting's next week, Douglas said. Maybe we could grab coffee after, talk about the curriculum for the children's program. I'd like that. I touched Leon's headstone one last time. Your father always said the best gardens need different kinds of flowers. And good soil, Douglas added. And patience. And love, Ethan chimed in, rejoining us. Grandpa said that's the most important part. Walking back to our cars, I watched Douglas help Ethan tie his shoelace, taking time instead of rushing. The expensive watch was gone, replaced by a simple one that kept better time. Mom, Ethan asked as we reached the parking lot, can we stop by Dad's apartment? I want to check on the new seeds we planted. Sure, honey. I looked at Douglas. If that's okay? He nodded, keys jingling in his hand. I made cookies. Well, tried to make cookies. They're a little burnt, but just like Grandpa's, Ethan laughed. He always forgot them in the oven. As we drove through the city, past the lot where the first memorial garden would grow, I thought about Leon's last words to me. Sometimes the greatest act of love is letting people find their own way back. Douglas's apartment was small but bright, the window box bursting with late-blooming flowers. Ethan ran to check his seeds while Douglas served slightly blackened cookies on mismatched plates. The board's considering me for a promotion, he said, watching Ethan water the plants. Assistant Director of Community Programs. You've earned it, I said sincerely. Every step. Thanks to you for not using that second letter, for giving me a chance to grow up. Thanks to Leon, I corrected. He knew exactly what he was doing, planting all those seeds. Outside, the autumn sun warmed the little window garden, promising growth through another season. Inside, father and son discussed soil composition while sharing burnt cookies, building something new from the ashes of what was lost. Some things, I realized, have to break apart before they can grow back stronger. Leon knew that all along. He'd planned this garden years ago, planting hope in the most unlikely soil, waiting patiently for spring.
The morning sun streamed into the kitchen as I sipped my coffee, browsing through some old photo albums. It was surprising how quickly time had passed. As I turned the pages, I remembered the moments we shared as a family. There were photos from vacations, birthdays, school events, and simple family outings. It all felt so recent, yet some of those moments were years ago. Daniel walked into the kitchen, his face fresh from his morning shave. "Morning, Clara. What are you looking at?" "Just some old photos," I replied, showing him a picture of our family from last Christmas. "Remember this?" He chuckled. "Oh, the time when Alex tried to cook the turkey? That was something." Alex, our eldest, had a passion for cooking, but was still learning. That Christmas, he'd tried to surprise us by taking on the turkey dinner, but ended up charring it a bit. We had laughed it off, saying it was the thought that counted. Liam, hearing us from the living room, shouted, "Don't remind me. I was the one who had to order the last-minute pizza." Daniel and I laughed, recalling how our traditional Christmas dinner was replaced with pizza that year. The day moved along just like any other. Daniel left for work, while I prepared the boys' lunches and got them ready for school. Alex and Liam, despite their occasional sibling spats, were thick as thieves. They were both in high school, with Alex being 2 years older than Liam. Their bond was something I cherished. They were each other's confidants, and their laughter often echoed through the house. That evening, as we sat for dinner, I brought up Daniel's upcoming 55th birthday. "We should do something special," I mused. "Like what, Mom?" Liam asked, his face lighting up at the idea. "I was thinking of a quiet family dinner," I began, but Alex interrupted. "Come on, Mom. Dad's turning 55. We should throw him a big party." Daniel, trying to hide his excitement, said, "I'd prefer something quiet, but I won't mind a party." The days leading up to Daniel's party were hectic. There was so much to do. Invitations to send out, food to arrange, decorations to put up. The boys were a tremendous help. They'd come home from school and immediately get to work, helping in any way they could. Alex took charge of the guest list, ensuring that all of Daniel's closest friends were invited. Liam, being the more artistic one, had ideas for decorations that would make the night truly memorable. One afternoon, as I was on my way to pick up the cake, I received a call from Ella. "Hey, Clara," she began, her voice sweet. "I heard about Daniel's party. Can I come?" Ella was a distant relative, a cousin's daughter, I believe. She was much younger, in her early 20s, and had often visited us during her childhood. Of late, however, she had drifted away, caught up in her own life, I guessed. "Of course, Ella," I responded. "It's been ages. We'd love to have you." "Great," she replied. "I'll see you soon." The day of the party arrived. The house was buzzing with energy. Liam and Alex were ensuring everything was perfect. Guests began to arrive, filling our home with laughter and chatter. Strangely, Daniel was late. He was never late, especially not for something this important. As the clock ticked on, I grew anxious. Calls to his phone went unanswered. And then, the front door opened. But instead of a cheerful Daniel ready to be surprised, he walked in with Ella on his arm. The room went silent. The jovial atmosphere vanished in an instant. My heart raced, and my palms felt clammy. Something was off. Daniel cleared his throat. "Everyone, I have something to say," he began, his voice unsteady. "Clara, I want a divorce. Ella is pregnant, and I'm the father." The room was so silent, I could hear the tick of the clock on the wall. My mind raced, trying to process what I'd just heard. How could this be? Everything had been perfect just a few hours ago. Alex stood up, his face red with anger. "Dad, what are you saying? This is a joke, right?" Liam, always the quieter one, just stared at the floor, tears forming in his eyes. Ella looked around the room, her face flushed. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but I wasn't sure if she meant it. Daniel looked at me, waiting for a response. But words failed me. The life I thought I knew was falling apart in front of my eyes. Guests began to murmur among themselves, and slowly, they started to leave. The party was over before it even began. That night, the boys and I sat in the living room, trying to make sense of everything. Alex was fuming. "I can't believe Dad would do this to us," he muttered. Liam, his voice shaky, said, "What are we going to do now, Mom?" I took a deep breath, trying to muster strength. "We'll figure it out, boys. We always do." But deep down, I was as lost and scared as they were. Our life was unraveling, and I didn't know how to stop it. The days after the party were a blur. News of Daniel's revelation spread like wildfire. Friends and family were shocked. Some even called to express their disbelief. The phone rang incessantly, with many offering support, but I often let it go to voicemail. I needed time to think, to process everything. The boys were taking it particularly hard. Alex, especially, was vocal about his feelings. "I can't believe Dad would do this to us," he'd often say, anger evident in his voice. Liam, on the other hand, was more reserved. He spent a lot of time in his room, often lost in thought. One day, as we were having dinner, Alex announced, "I'm going to live with Dad. Liam and I both. It's a bigger house, and besides, boys should be with their father." I looked at him, surprised. "Are you sure about this, Alex? Have you talked to Liam?" Alex glanced at Liam, who nodded. "Yes, we've discussed it. We think it's for the best." Liam added, "We just think, with everything going on, we should be there for him too." I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. If that's what you both want, then okay. The decision was made. The next week, the boys packed their bags and moved in with Daniel and Ella. The house felt empty without them, but I respected their decision. It wasn't long before things started to change, though. One evening, I received a call from Alex. "Mom," he began, his voice strained. "Ella is making our lives miserable. She throws parties all the time, and her friends are always over. They're loud and obnoxious." Liam took over the phone. "Mom, it's not what we thought. Ella doesn't want us there. She's making it very clear." My heart ached hearing their words. "Boys, you can always come back home. This is your home." There was silence on the other end. Then Alex replied, "We'll think about it, Mom." Days turned into weeks, and the tension grew. The boys were unhappy, and even Daniel started to see Ella's true colors. One evening, there was another knock on my door. It was Daniel and Ella. Ella, her face red with anger, started, "Clara, you need to take your sons back. They're ruining our life." Daniel looked embarrassed but said nothing. I replied calmly, "They're your sons too, Daniel. They can decide where they want to live." Ella huffed, "This is ridiculous. We can't have them here." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to say something, to defend our children, but he remained silent. It was clear where his loyalties lay. The boys eventually returned home, and our small apartment was filled with life again. Although it was a tight space, the warmth of our bond made it comfortable. Ella's attitude had worn them out, and they regretted ever leaving. Their return also brought to light how deeply Ella's influence was entrenched in Daniel's life. One evening, as I was scrolling through my social media, an idea began to form. I knew Ella was always chasing after the flashy lifestyle. Her posts were filled with pictures of expensive items, fancy dinners, and luxurious vacations. I wondered if I could use this to my advantage. "Boys," I called out, gathering them in the living room, "I have an idea." Alex looked curious. "What is it, Mom?" "I think it's time we take matters into our own hands. Ella's been having her fun, but it's time we expose her for who she really is." Liam raised an eyebrow. "How do you plan on doing that?" I explained my plan, detailing each step. "I'm going to create a fake profile of a rich, successful man. If Ella is as shallow as I think she is, she'll take the bait." Alex smirked. "This could actually work, but what's the end goal?" I took a deep breath. "I want to show Daniel her true colors. I want him to see that she's using him, that she's not the angel he thinks she is." Liam looked hesitant. "It's risky, Mom. What if you get caught?" I nodded. "I know, but it's a risk I'm willing to take." With the boys' help, we set up a profile, complete with pictures of a handsome, wealthy-looking man, luxurious vacations, and high-end cars. We named him Max Sterling. Within a day of creating the profile, I sent Ella a friend request, which she quickly accepted. I wasted no time and sent her a message. "Max, hey, came across your profile. You have a stunning smile." Ella responded almost instantly. "Ella, thank you, Max. Your profile looks impressive. Businessman?" Max, "Yes, I dabble in a bit of everything. Real estate, stocks, you name it. By the way, are you single?" Ella replied with a wink emoji. "Currently in a situation, but nothing too serious. Why do you ask?" Max, "Well, I'm looking for someone to accompany me to some events. I could use a beautiful woman by my side." Ella's response was swift and eager. "Sounds tempting. Tell me more." And so, our pen pal affair began. Ella opened up about her life, and as I'd predicted, she didn't have many kind words about Daniel. She talked about how she was just in it for the money and the luxurious life. She even mentioned faking her pregnancy to tie him down. But the worst came when she referred to me as her silly aunt and laughed about how easily she had played everyone. I had all the evidence I needed. One evening, the doorbell rang. It was Daniel. He looked worn out. "Clara, can we talk?" he asked, his voice breaking. I let him in. We sat in silence for a while. Finally, he spoke. "I think I made a mistake. Ella is different." I smirked. "Oh, you have no idea." We gathered in the living room of the house I once called home. The heavy drapes held back the evening sun, casting the room in a subdued light, matching the somber mood. Daniel looked apprehensive, constantly glancing at the front door. The boys sat rigidly, their faces reflecting a mix of anger and anticipation. Ella entered, her confident demeanor suggesting she was expecting a very different gathering. "What's all this?" she questioned, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the room, landing on me. Before anyone could reply, Daniel, with a newfound courage, handed her the tablet. "You should see this." She frowned, scrolling through the conversation. Her confident stance faltered, replaced with growing panic. She looked up, her gaze darting between Daniel and me, realizing she had been caught. "Is this your doing?" she spat, directing her anger at me. Ignoring her accusation, I asked calmly, "Is it true, Ella? Were you just using Daniel for his money? And the pregnancy?" She laughed, though there was no humor in it. "Why should it matter? He was an easy target." Alex, unable to contain his anger, shot up. You played with our lives for your own selfish reasons. Ella smirked. Should have kept your noses out of my business then. Liam, ever the mediator, tried reasoning. You could have just been honest from the start. Why play this game? She looked defiant. Because it was easy, and I got what I wanted. He was just a stepping stone. Daniel, his voice shaking, finally spoke. Did you ever care about me? Even a little? She shrugged nonchalantly. You served a purpose. That's all. With those final cold words, she stormed out, leaving a trail of destruction in her wake. There was a heavy silence. Daniel looked utterly broken, his world shattered. I sighed. I'm sorry, Daniel, but you had to know. He nodded, tears streaming down his face. I was so blind. Alex looked at his father, his voice firm. You made your choice, Dad. You decided to trust her over us. Liam added, echoing his brother's sentiments. Actions have consequences. Daniel sat there, crushed by the weight of Ella's betrayal and his own decisions. And while it was painful to watch, neither I nor my children felt any sympathy for him. I found myself back at the house just a few days after the revelation. This time, it was to discuss the terms of our divorce. It felt surreal. The house, which once echoed with our shared dreams, now stood as a testament to our broken trust. The boys were adamant they wanted to be present, to ensure things were fair. They had grown so much during this time, standing firm and supporting me. Daniel looked even more worn out, as if the weight of his mistakes was physically pushing him down. He started, Clara, I can't begin to express how deeply sorry I am. Save it, I cut him off. This isn't about apologies. Let's get to business. Liam took out a piece of paper. We've listed out what we think is a fair division. We don't want more than we deserve, but we certainly won't accept less. Daniel skimmed through it, then looked up, hesitating. Clara, the house. I thought we could sell it and split the money. Alex snorted. Why? So you can give half to Ella? I intervened. No, the house stays with the boys and me. You have other properties. You won't be left homeless. Daniel tried again. It's just that the house holds memories for me too. Memories you were willing to tarnish by bringing Ella into our home, I retorted. He looked down, defeated. Fine, I won't contest it. The conversation moved on to other assets, bank accounts, and investments. It was a grueling process, bringing up more raw emotions. Every time we hit a roadblock, one of the boys would step in, reminding Daniel of his responsibilities. Finally, after what felt like hours, we reached an agreement. The boys and I would retain the family home and most of the joint savings. Daniel would keep his personal assets and the vacation home. As we were about to leave, Daniel spoke, Clara, I know I don't have any right to ask, but can we ever find a way to move past this? Not as a couple, but maybe, someday, as friends? I took a deep breath. Daniel, right now, I don't have an answer. All I know is that trust, once broken, is hard to rebuild. Liam added, and actions have consequences, Dad. You chose to betray us. Alex, ever the protective one, chimed in. You need to live with the choices you made. Daniel nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. I understand. Our move to the apartment was surprisingly smooth. With the boys' help, we set up our new home. While it lacked the sprawling grandeur of the house, it had a warmth that the mansion lost a long time ago. It wasn't long before I started hearing rumors. Word spread fast in our close-knit community. Ella was the talk of the town, with her web of lies coming undone one thread at a time. One afternoon, as I sipped my coffee in a cafe downtown, Mrs. Jenkins, a longtime neighbor, approached. Clara, dear, she began, her voice oozing false concern. Have you heard? That young girl, Ella, apparently, she's been seeing multiple men behind Daniel's back. I took a sip, not letting her words rile me. Not surprised, I replied, matter-of-factly. Mrs. Jenkins leaned in closer, as if sharing a state secret. And it's not just that. They say she never was pregnant to start with. I raised an eyebrow. Well, that's something. But honestly, Mrs. Jenkins, it's no longer my concern. She looked taken aback. Oh, but dear, it's such a scandal. I met her gaze, unwavering. A scandal I have no part in. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have matters to attend to. As the days went by, more revelations surfaced. Ella's escapades became the stuff of legend. The latest was about her being involved in some shady business deals. One evening, as we were having dinner, Alex shared, "Dad's business is suffering. People don't want to associate with him anymore because of Ella." Liam added, "I heard some partners pulled out of deals." I took a moment, then said, "It's unfortunate, but he chose to align with her. This is the outcome of his choices." The doorbell rang, disrupting our conversation. To our surprise, it was Daniel. "Clara," he began, "I need to talk." I nodded. "Fine, but keep it brief." He sighed, looking more disheveled than ever. "It's all falling apart. The business, my reputation, everything." Alex scoffed. "What did you expect?" Daniel looked pained. "I know I messed up, but I didn't expect it to go this bad." I crossed my arms. "You let a snake into your life, Daniel. It was bound to bite." He looked defeated. "I know. I just hoped." Liam interrupted. "Hoped what? That your betrayal wouldn't have consequences?" Daniel lowered his head. "I'm sorry." Alex, never one to mince words, said, "Sorry doesn't cut it. You made your bed." I added, "Daniel, it's time you face the music. Clean up the mess you made." He nodded, turning to leave. "Thank you for hearing me out." The days turned into weeks, and then months. The boys adjusted to their new school and made new friends. We no longer heard or talked about Daniel's misfortunes. Our focus was on the future, not the past. One morning, as I prepared breakfast, Liam walked in with a letter in hand. "It's from the court," he announced, his face giving nothing away. I opened it and skimmed through. The final verdict of the property division was in. The judge ruled in our favor. Most of the assets were awarded to us. Alex peeked over my shoulder. "Wow, that's a lot more than I expected." I nodded. "Yes, but remember, material possessions are fleeting. Our real wealth is here," I said, tapping my heart, "with family." Liam smiled. "Couldn't agree more, Mom." The doorbell rang, and Alex went to answer. It was Mr. Wilson, our former gardener from the mansion. He looked different, happier. "Clara, good to see you. I brought you these." He handed over a basket of fresh flowers. "From your favorite part of the old garden." Tears filled my eyes. "Thank you, Wilson. This means a lot." He grinned. "I heard about the verdict. I'm glad justice prevailed." I nodded. "Thank you for sticking by us, even after everything." He waved it off. "You were always kind to me. Besides, everyone knew what Ella was about. It was only a matter of time." We chatted a bit more, reminiscing about the old days before he left. The boys and I sat down for breakfast, the aroma of fresh flowers filling the room. Alex broke the silence. "Mom, have you thought about what we'll do now?" Liam added, "With the assets and all?" I took a moment. "I've been thinking. Perhaps it's time for a fresh start, somewhere new. We can sell the house, the cars, everything. We'll have enough to start over." Alex looked intrigued. "Where were you thinking?" "Somewhere by the coast. Always loved the sound of waves." Liam beamed. "I'm in." Alex chuckled. "Yeah, me too." We started planning our move. A new place, away from the shadows of our past. It was exhilarating. A few weeks later, we packed our bags and headed to our new home. A quaint house overlooking the sea, where mornings started with sunrises and nights ended with the soothing sounds of waves. One evening, as the sun painted the horizon in hues of gold, Liam joined me. "You know, Mom, this is the best decision we ever made." I smiled, looking out at the vast expanse. "Yes, sometimes endings are just new beginnings in disguise." Liam wrapped his arm around my shoulders. "Here's to our new beginning." I sighed contentedly. "Here's to us." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, we looked ahead, our hearts full of hope, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. My name is Clara, and the story I'm about to tell you begins 2 years after I married Ethan. Our love story was like a fairy tale at the start. We met at a summer music festival. I remember dropping my drink, and when I looked up, there he was, offering me his. His smile was genuine, his eyes sincere. It felt like one of those moments when you just know. "Need a hand?" he had asked, pointing at the spilled drink on the ground. I had laughed, feeling embarrassed. "Looks like I do." We talked for hours that night. From our favorite movies to our shared love of hiking, it felt like we'd known each other forever. By the end of the festival, Ethan and I were inseparable, and within a year, we were married. However, life has a way of bringing challenges. For us, that challenge came in the form of Ethan's family, particularly his mother, Mrs. Mason, and his sister Lila. I moved into the family home after the wedding. It was Ethan's idea. He said it would help us save for our own place. I was hesitant, but eventually agreed. At first, Mrs. Mason seemed welcoming, but as days turned into weeks, her true nature began to show. Every decision I made, whether it was about the house, Ethan, or even the smallest things like what to cook, was met with criticism. "Ethan doesn't like spicy food," she would remark when I tried making a new recipe. It felt odd because Ethan and I had shared spicy dishes on many of our dates. "Did you know that, Clara?" Lila would often chime in through Skype from Hawaii, her tone always condescending. "You should pay more attention to what my brother likes." Even when they were not together, Lila and Mrs. Mason seemed to be on the same team, always pointing out what they felt I was doing wrong. Ethan, on the other hand, was often caught in the middle. I expected him to stand up for me, but he rarely did. Most times, he chose to stay quiet, which felt like a betrayal. One evening after dinner, I tried discussing it with him. "Ethan, do you notice how your mother and Lila treat me?" He looked uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. "They're just looking out for me, Clara. They want the best for me." I felt a lump in my throat. "And am I not the best?" He sighed, avoiding my eyes. "It's not that. They just need time to get used to you." But time wasn't helping. As days went by, I felt more like an outsider in my own home. I missed the days of the music festival, where the promise of love felt so strong. Here, amidst the walls of the Mason family house, our foundation was shaking, and I wasn't sure how long I could hold on. The only solace I found was in Ethan's grandfather, Joe. He was kind and always had a listening ear. Whenever things got tough, I would think of him and feel a bit better. But the real test of our relationship was just around the corner, and it came in the form of an invitation to Hawaii. Little did I know that this would be the tipping point, forcing me to take drastic measures. Upon finding the beautifully adorned envelope, a surge of excitement coursed through me. The idea of a brief respite in Hawaii seemed like a dream. I quickly opened it, and the words, "You're invited," gleamed in golden letters. It was an invitation to Grandpa Joe's 80th birthday. The prospect of spending time with Grandpa, who always showed me kindness, filled me with hope. Just as I was getting lost in the details of the invitation, Ethan entered. "What's that?" he asked, not even bothering to hide the hint of annoyance in his voice. "It's an invitation from your grandfather. He's celebrating his 80th birthday in Hawaii," I replied, trying to gauge his reaction. Ethan took a quick glance. "Oh, that. Lila mentioned it." His tone caught me off guard. "She did? Why didn't you tell me?" He shrugged, dismissing the matter. "Must have slipped my mind." The phone suddenly rang, its shrill tone piercing the room. Before I could answer, Ethan grabbed it. I could hear Lila's voice, sharp and demanding. Ethan listened, nodding occasionally, casting sidelong glances at me. My heart sank with every nod. When he finally hung up, he looked squarely at me. "Lila thinks it's best if you stayed behind," he stated, with an air of finality. I was astounded. "But your grandfather invited me personally. Why wouldn't I come?" Ethan sighed dramatically, making it seem like he was bearing a huge burden. "Look, it's a family thing. Grandpa was just being polite. Plus, Lila said you should stay with Mom and keep her company." I felt my voice shake, trying to suppress my rising emotions. "Ethan, I'm your wife. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I thought you'd stand up for me." Ethan smirked. "Always playing the victim, aren't you? Why do you always make things so difficult?" I felt tears pricking my eyes, my voice barely above a whisper. "Because I thought I meant something to you." He laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh that cut deeper than any words could. "You think too much." It was clear to me then. My place in this family, or lack thereof, wasn't just Lila or Mrs. Mason's doing. Ethan was part of the problem. He was more than happy to let me bear the brunt of their disdain, to be their scapegoat, to keep the peace for himself. The invitation that had once promised a fresh start now felt like a cruel joke. I was alone in this, and if I was going to find my place, or escape from this trap, it would be on my own terms. The days following the revelation about the trip were thick with tension. I busied myself with work and chores, trying my best to stay out of Ethan's and Mrs. Mason's way. The hurt was still fresh, and every encounter was a painful reminder of my place, or lack thereof, in the family. Ethan was unusually quiet around me. Every time our paths crossed, he'd avoid eye contact, his guilt evident. But it wasn't guilt that would change anything. He was just uneasy about the confrontation. One evening, while Ethan was out and Mrs. Mason was in her room, I decided to pack for them. Call it a wife's duty, or maybe I was just trying to prove something to myself. Either way, I felt it was something I needed to do. I meticulously folded their clothes, making sure everything was in order. The Hawaii trip was supposed to be a joyful occasion, and even if I wasn't going, I wanted to make sure they had everything they needed. It was a silent way of showing that despite everything, I was still trying to be a supportive wife. As I was zipping up Ethan's suitcase, I noticed that it was strikingly similar to mine. Same size, same color, same brand. A mischievous idea began to form. I could switch the suitcases. Ethan's had all the important travel documents for him and Mrs. Mason. My suitcase had my personal items, nothing of great significance. It was out of character for me to even think of such a thing. But the recent events had stirred something within. I was tired of being overlooked, of being the one who always had to understand, to adjust. Maybe, just maybe, they needed a wake-up call. And so I acted on the impulse. I swapped the contents of the suitcases, leaving Ethan's travel documents in my suitcase. I placed the suitcase in my closet and left Ethan's, now filled with my belongings, ready for the trip. It was a simple act, but for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of control. Whatever the outcome, it was a step, however small, towards reclaiming my worth. The next days would certainly be eventful. The morning sun streamed through the bedroom window, casting a soft golden hue across the room. I stretched, feeling surprisingly refreshed despite the weight of the recent events. As I sat on the bed, the reality of the suitcase switch began to sink in. I had done something bold, something completely out of character, and it gave me an unfamiliar sense of empowerment. As I sipped my morning coffee, my thoughts shifted to what would come next. Ethan and Mrs. Mason were scheduled to leave in a few days, and I had effectively blocked their plans. They would realize the switch at the airport, and the fallout would be significant. But was that enough? As these thoughts circled, my phone buzzed. It was Jessica, my close friend from university days. We had lost touch over the years, but our bond was one that time couldn't erode. "Hey, long time no chat. How have you been?" Jessica's message read. I hesitated for a moment before replying. "Hi, Jess. It's been a roller coaster. Can we talk?" Minutes later, my phone rang. "Clara? What's going on? You sound serious." I sighed deeply. "Ethan and his family. They've made things tough for me." Jessica listened patiently as I narrated the events leading up to the suitcase switch. When I finished, there was a pause before she finally spoke. "Wow, Clara, I don't even know what to say, but I'm glad you did something about it. You've always been too nice." I chuckled. "Yeah, maybe too nice for my own good." Jessica continued. "You know, if you need a break, you should come over to my place. It's been ages since we caught up, and maybe some time away will do you good." The idea was appealing. "Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose." "Nonsense. It'll be just like old times. Plus, I could use the company." A plan began to form in my mind. Not just a short-term plan to evade the immediate fallout of the suitcase switch, but a long-term one. a plan to take back control of my life. Okay, Jess, I'll come. But I want to do more than just visit. I need a fresh start, away from all this mess. Jessica's voice was filled with enthusiasm. Absolutely, let's do it. We'll figure it out together. Over the next couple of days, I started preparing. Within the home office, I quickly secured my finances. Transferring funds and locking Ethan out of joint accounts was easier than I anticipated. The reality of it all made me feel empowered. No longer would I let Ethan or his family control any aspect of my life, including my finances. I packed my essential belongings, making sure to leave Ethan's and Mrs. Mason's things untouched. When everything was packed and set, I allowed myself a brief moment of reflection. I thought of the love Ethan and I once shared, the dreams we had built together. But as quickly as the memories surfaced, I shut them out. This was not the time to get emotional. Every step felt like a step towards freedom. The day of Ethan and Mrs. Mason's scheduled departure arrived. As they left for the airport, I wished them a safe trip, holding back a smirk. Once their car was out of sight, I quickly grabbed my bags and called a cab. As I looked at our home from the back seat of the cab, I felt a mix of emotions. There was sadness, of course, but also relief and hope. Hope for a new beginning, a life where I was in control. Jessica was waiting for me when I arrived at her apartment. We hugged tightly, two old friends reconnecting in the midst of chaos. "It's going to be okay, Clara," she whispered. I nodded. I know. It's a new chapter. And as the evening sun set, casting a beautiful orange glow across the city, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Once at Jessica's, I took a few hours to relax and catch my breath. The warmth of her welcome was just what I needed, a stark contrast to the coldness I had escaped. As evening approached, I remembered my phone, which I had purposely turned off. Curiosity and a bit of defiance prompted me to switch it on. Instantly, notifications began to pour in. Missed calls, voice messages, texts. The sheer number was overwhelming. But rather than feeling anxious or fearful, a profound sense of satisfaction took over me. Each notification was evidence of the panic and confusion I had left in my wake. The number of them, each one a testament to their disarray, filled my heart with joy and vengeful pleasure. Jessica, spotting the triumphant glint in my eye, asked, "All good?" I showed her the barrage of missed calls, and we both shared a laugh. "Better than good," I replied. "To new beginnings and finding your own path," Jessica toasted, raising her glass. I clinked mine against hers. "To finally living for myself." Jessica and I were sprawled across her living room floor, with takeout boxes scattered around us, talking late into the night. We were sharing old stories, laughing at some of the mischief we got up to during our college days. It was comforting, and for a moment, I felt like my old self again. The moment was short-lived. My phone, which I'd left on the coffee table, began to ring. The screen showed Ethan's number. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. Jessica gave me a reassuring nod. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Where are you?" Ethan's voice boomed from the other side. His tone was a mix of anger and desperation. "I'm safe, Ethan," I replied calmly, deliberately avoiding answering his question. "What have you done?" he yelled. "Mom's crying. We missed the flight and you just disappeared." "I did what I had to do, for myself," I said firmly. "This isn't like you. You're acting crazy. Why are you doing this?" he exclaimed. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to remain calm. "This is the result of the choices you and your family made, Ethan. I've been feeling trapped, ignored, and mocked. When your sister told me not to come and you didn't stand up for me, that was the last straw." Ethan scoffed. "You're blowing this way out of proportion. It was just a family reunion." I could feel the anger bubbling up inside me. "It's not just about the reunion, Ethan. It's about respect. You never took my side. You never protected our relationship from your family's judgments. You laughed at my feelings. That reunion was just a representation of how little you value our relationship." I could hear his mother's voice in the background, shouting, "Ask her where our documents are. We need them." Ethan tried to keep his voice calm, though I could hear the strain. "Look, just come back home. We can sort this out." I replied, It's not that simple anymore, Ethan. I need space to think, to decide what's best for me. Jessica motioned for the phone. Surprised, I handed it to her. Ethan, she began, her voice firm, listen carefully. She's safe, and she's with friends who care about her. You need to respect her decision and give her some space. He didn't reply for a moment. Then he said, Fine, but we need our documents. They're in the house, I interjected. Exactly where you left them. But maybe next time, you'll double-check things for yourself. With that, I ended the call. I turned off the phone just to be sure no more interruptions would come through. Jessica sighed and wrapped an arm around my shoulders. It's going to be okay. You're strong and you're not alone. I smiled weakly. Thanks, Jessica. I just wish it didn't have to be this way. She squeezed my shoulder. Sometimes, life pushes us in ways we never expected, but it leads to better things. I leaned against her, taking comfort from her words. The confrontation had drained me, but it had also reaffirmed my belief that I was making the right choice. For the first time in years, I was prioritizing myself, and it felt liberating. I woke up the next day to the sound of birds chirping outside Jessica's window. The sunlight streamed in, filling the room with warmth. I stretched and then checked the time. It was still early, but I felt surprisingly refreshed. There was a feeling of determination building inside of me. I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, and now I needed to tie up some loose ends. One thing that had been on my mind was Ethan's grandfather. I didn't want him to think ill of me or believe the twisted story that Ethan and his family might spin. I had always admired him, and I felt he deserved to hear my side of things. Picking up my phone, I dialed his number. After a couple of rings, he answered. Hello? His voice was gentle and warm. Hi, Grandpa Joe. It's me, I began, a bit nervously. Ah, my dear. I was wondering when I'd hear from you, he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. Been quite a commotion over here. Ethan and his mother seem to have misplaced some documents. I chuckled. Yes, there was a little mix-up. Grandpa Joe sighed. I've heard bits and pieces of what happened. Ethan's not too pleased, and well, his mother is her usual self, but I want to hear it from you. Taking a deep breath, I recounted everything, from the way Ethan's family had treated me, the incident with the reunion, and the decision I made afterward. Throughout my retelling, Grandpa Joe listened quietly. When I finished, he spoke. You've been through a lot, more than anyone should have to bear. I just couldn't take it anymore, Grandpa Joe, I replied. I love Ethan, but it felt like it was me against his whole family. He paused for a moment. You did what was right for you, and I respect that. It's a shame Ethan never truly saw what a gem he had in you. Hearing his words, I felt a rush of emotions. Thank you, Grandpa Joe. I just wanted you to know. I didn't want you to think badly of me. He laughed softly. Never. You've always been honest and kind. Sometimes you have to make tough decisions to protect yourself. I wish things had been different, I whispered. Life has a way of moving in mysterious directions, he replied. But remember, each challenge you face only makes you stronger. We spoke for a bit longer, discussing his upcoming birthday plans and how he hoped I would visit him someday. Before we ended the call, he said, You have my blessing, dear, whatever path you choose. Hanging up, I felt a weight lifted off my shoulders. With Grandpa Joe's understanding and support, I felt even more resolute in my decision. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it head-on. Life without Ethan and his toxic family was like a breath of fresh air. It was as if I had been underwater for so long that I had forgotten what it felt like to simply breathe. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of purpose and joy. I no longer had to tiptoe around or constantly be on guard, dreading the next insult or confrontation. With each passing day, my self-worth grew. I started seeing a therapist who helped me understand that I deserved better. As weeks turned into months, my strength was evident, not just to me but to those around me. Friends commented on how my eyes sparkled differently, and even acquaintances noticed the bounce in my step. But the most significant change was internal. No longer was I consumed by anger or the desire for revenge. Instead, a sense of peace settled in. I had reclaimed my life. Each day was an opportunity to rediscover who I truly was, without the shackles of a demeaning relationship. One evening, as I was settling in with a book, my phone buzzed. I picked it up and saw a message from Grandpa Joe. "Stay strong," it read. "You're doing better than you know." Grandpa Joe had become an unlikely pillar of support during my transition. His decision to change his will was a statement, but his continued messages and calls were a testament to his belief in me. Despite our limited past interactions, he became someone I could confide in. He shared stories of his youth, his struggles, and how he overcame them. Each tale was a lesson, a beacon guiding me through my journey. Soon, I embarked on new ventures. I took up classes, traveled to places I had always wanted to, and even started a small online business. With every achievement, no matter how small, my confidence surged. Grandpa Joe once told me, "Life has a way of balancing things out. You've seen the rough tides, now it's time for calm waters." And he was right. The past was behind me, and the future looked brighter than ever. The road ahead was filled with endless possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them all.
The kitchen, with its sunlit tiles and aroma of stew simmering, felt far less inviting than it used to. I could feel the weight of Mark's stare as he scanned the room, looking for something to criticize. "You've made the same stew again, Anna?" Mark remarked, a hint of disdain in his voice. "It's your favorite, Mark. I thought you thought wrong, like always." He cut me off, his voice rising. "Every day it's the same thing. I come home after a long day, hoping for something different, something better. But all I get is this monotony." I bit back a retort, looking down to hide the hurt in my eyes. "And what have you done all day, Anna?" He prodded further. "Sitting around, chatting with your friends on the phone, I bet. You're just a sponger, Anna." I felt my face flush with embarrassment and anger. Before I could respond, Sarah entered the kitchen. The hope I harbored, that she'd be my ally in these moments, quickly vanished when she spoke. "Honestly, Mom, why don't you try something new for a change? Or better yet, why don't you do something useful for once?" she snapped, grabbing an apple from the fruit bowl and taking a bite with an exaggerated crunch. I tried to remain calm, holding back tears. I thought making something familiar would be comforting. "I'm sorry if it wasn't to your liking." Sarah scoffed, looking eerily similar to her father in that moment. "It's not about the food, Mom. It's about how you just exist in this house, like a piece of furniture." Feeling cornered and overwhelmed, I mustered up the little dignity I had left. "I've always done my best for this family. Maybe one day you'll see that." Mark chuckled darkly. "Oh, Anna, always playing the victim. You know, maybe if you had a father growing up, you'd know how to be a better wife and mother." I gasped, shocked at his cruel words. The sting of his remark hit deep, reminding me of the father-shaped void in my life. Sarah, echoing her father's sentiment, added, "Maybe then you'd be less of a burden." Feeling the weight of their combined disdain, I took a deep breath. "I'll be in my room. Dinner's ready whenever you want it," I said quietly, leaving the kitchen and praying for the strength to endure another day in this crumbling facade of a family. Days turned into weeks, and the atmosphere at home remained tense. Sarah was out more often than not, and when she was home, she spent most of her time locked in her room. Mark, on the other hand, became increasingly distant, coming home late from work and sometimes not at all. One day, as I was heading to the local market, I saw something that stopped me in my tracks. Just around the corner from our home, there was Mark, laughing and talking with a younger woman. They seemed close, too close. Their body language spoke volumes. I watched, hidden behind a tree, as they shared a tender kiss. The air felt heavy, and my heart raced. This was my husband, the man I had given my life to, and here he was, betraying our vows. The weight of this realization made my knees weak, and I quickly turned and headed home, my mind racing. As soon as I entered the house, I was met with Sarah's cold stare. "Where were you? Took you long enough," she commented snidely. "I saw your father," I replied, trying to maintain my composure. "Oh, with his secretary. I've known for months. But who cares? At least he's happy." She shrugged, revealing her knowledge of the affair with such nonchalance that it felt like another blow. I felt numb. My own daughter knew and didn't care. "Sarah, how could you hide this from me?" She rolled her eyes. "Because it's none of my business, or yours for that matter. Maybe if you were more interesting or tried harder, he wouldn't need someone else." The pain of her words was sharp, but I was determined not to let her see me crumble. "Your father and I are going to have a talk when he gets home." She smirked. "Good luck with that." Hours seemed to drag by. When Mark finally walked through the door, he looked surprised to see me waiting for him. "Anna, what's this all about?" "Who is she, Mark?" I demanded. He hesitated, looking momentarily caught off guard, then sighed. "I was going to tell you, Anna. It wasn't the right time." "So there's a right time to tell your wife you're cheating on her?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts to sound strong. Mark rubbed his temples. "Look, Anna, things haven't been great between us for a long time. She makes me feel alive again. I felt like I was being torn apart. And what about me, Mark? What about our marriage? Our family?" "It's not just about you, Anna," he shouted back. "It's about me and what I want. Maybe if you'd been more supportive or understanding, things would be different." The weight of everything crashed down on me. The loveless marriage, the estrangement from my daughter, and now, the final blow, Mark's betrayal. But I wouldn't let them see me broken. "I've done nothing but support this family," I whispered, feeling tears sting my eyes. "But I won't be your doormat any longer, Mark. I want a divorce." His face paled. "You can't be serious." "Watch me," I replied, gathering a newfound strength from deep within. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Mark looked at me, truly seeing me for the first time in what felt like years. He didn't say anything more. He just turned and went to our room. I looked around the house where I had spent the best years of my life, and realized that it wasn't my home anymore. The final straw had been drawn. It was time for a change. Moving into my mother's old house wasn't easy. The memories of her surrounded me, and sometimes I felt her presence so vividly it was as though she was still with me. I would hear her laughter in the creaks of the wooden floors, or see her reflection in the old mirrors. However, over time, the pain of her absence became a comforting presence. I slowly began to fill the rooms with my own energy and found solace in the home I had once shared with her. One afternoon, as I was cleaning the attic, dusting off old memories and tidying away the remnants of the past, there was a knock at the door. A firm, steady knock that seemed out of place in my quiet world. I hurried downstairs and opened the door. Standing there was an elderly man, dressed in a finely tailored suit, looking a little out of place amidst the simplicity of the neighborhood. "Can I help you?" I asked, a bit puzzled. The man cleared his throat. "Are you Anna?" I nodded. "Yes, I am. Who are you?" He took a deep breath. "I'm Richard. I knew your mother. We were close once." I looked him up and down, searching my memories for any mention of a Richard. Nothing came up. "I'm sorry, but I don't recall my mother mentioning a Richard." He looked pained but nodded. "She wouldn't have. Our parting was not amicable. I'm actually your father, Anna." The world around me seemed to blur, and I stumbled back a step. "What? That's impossible. My mother would have told me." Richard's eyes softened, filled with a mixture of pain and regret. "She had her reasons, Anna. I wish she had told you, but she chose to keep it from both of us." I felt a rush of anger. And why should I believe you?" Richard sighed and reached into his coat pocket, pulling out an old photograph. It was a picture of a young couple, very much in love. The woman was unmistakably my mother, and beside her was a younger Richard. They looked happy, their smiles genuine. "I kept this with me all these years," he whispered, handing it to me. The photograph felt heavy in my hands. Why now? Why come here after all these years? Richard looked down, a tear escaping his eye. "When I learned about your mother's passing, I started looking for you. I wanted to know my daughter." I leaned against the doorframe, feeling overwhelmed. "This is a lot to take in." He nodded. "I know, and I'm sorry for dropping this on you so suddenly. I wanted to meet you, get to know you." I looked into his eyes, searching for sincerity. They were the same shade as mine, a fact that didn't escape me. After what felt like hours, I nodded slowly. "Okay, come in." Richard smiled, relief evident on his face. "Thank you, Anna." As we sat in the living room sipping tea, Richard told me stories of his time with my mother, how they had met, the adventures they had shared, and the love they had felt. It was a bittersweet experience, hearing about the life my mother had before me. But with every word, the reality of Richard's claim solidified. By the end of the evening, as the sun set, casting a golden hue over the room, I felt a connection with Richard. He was a part of my history, a missing piece in the puzzle of my life. As he left, Richard turned to me, his eyes filled with hope. "Can we meet again?" I nodded. "Yes, I think we can." The door closed behind him, but a new chapter in my life had just begun. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. I'd wake up in the mornings, sometimes thinking it was all a dream. The father I'd never known was now suddenly a part of my life, and each day brought new revelations. Richard would visit often, sharing tales of his family, of the world he came from, a world of affluence and privilege. I learned that he was a successful businessman, having built a vast empire over the years. Despite all his success, he often mentioned a void, a piece of him that always felt missing. One day, as we sat on the porch sipping on lemonade, Richard turned to me, a contemplative look in his eyes. "Anna," he began, "there's something I've been thinking about. I want to meet Sarah, my granddaughter." I hesitated. Sarah hadn't been in touch since I left, and the thought of reconnecting with her felt daunting. "Richard, I don't know. She's changed, and our relationship is strained." He placed a reassuring hand on mine. "I understand, but I want to at least try, for both of us." I took a deep breath. "Okay, but we should plan it out. It won't be easy." Richard's eyes twinkled with mischief. "How about a little act? I've got an idea." Intrigued, I leaned in closer as he whispered his plan. The next day, Richard showed up at my doorstep in a battered old truck, wearing a shabby suit that looked like it had seen better days. I tried to stifle a giggle as he struck a pose. "Well, what do you think? Convincing?" I laughed. "Very. But what's with the truck?" He grinned. "Part of the plan. I thought it would be fun to show up as a poor, old truck driver, finally reuniting with his long-lost daughter." I nodded in agreement. "It's perfect. Let's do this." We drove to my old home, the place I had shared with Mark and Sarah. As we pulled up, I could see Sarah through the window, lounging on the couch. My heart raced. Richard gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. "You ready?" he asked. Taking a deep breath, I nodded, as I'll ever be. We walked up to the door, and I knocked. It swung open to reveal a surprised Sarah. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she asked, her eyes darting to Richard. I took a deep breath. "Sarah, this is Richard. He's my father, your grandfather." She looked him up and down, skepticism clear on her face. "Really? What's with the getup?" Richard chuckled. "Ah, young one. I wanted to see my family, and this old truck is all I've got." Sarah scoffed. "Typical. Well, if you were rich, maybe I'd consider calling you Grandpa." I felt a sting at her words, but Richard just smiled, playing along. "Oh, I wish I had more to offer, but all I have is love and some old stories." Mark then appeared, his gaze shifting between me and Richard. "What's this about?" he grumbled. Before I could reply, Richard stepped forward, extending a hand. "Hello, son-in-law. I'm Anna's father. Just thought I'd come by and see the family." Mark looked at the outstretched hand with disdain. "We don't need more freeloaders." I felt anger rising, but Richard gave me a calming look. "It's all right, Anna. We tried." Sarah, seeing an opportunity, smirked. "Yeah, Mom. Why don't you two go back to where you came from?" Tears welled up in my eyes. "All right, Sarah, we'll leave." As we walked away, Richard whispered, "Don't worry, it's all part of the plan." Weeks after moving into the mansion with Richard, the doors of the grand home swung open to Mark and Sarah, who seemingly showed up out of the blue. The transformation of the mansion's interior was astonishing. Lavish furnishings, pristine marble floors, and artwork that told stories of eras gone by. But the most significant change was in me. The once broken, downtrodden Anna had been replaced by a woman of grace and confidence. Sarah was the first to speak, her voice quivering with a mix of awe and desperation. "Mom, look at this place! Think of what you can do for me now, for my future!" Mark, ever the manipulator, tried a softer approach. "Anna," he said, placing a hand on my arm. I recoiled instantly. "For old times' sake and for Sarah, can't we just put everything behind us?" I looked into the eyes of the man I once loved, searching for a hint of sincerity. Instead, all I saw was greed. "Mark, your words might have swayed me once, but not anymore." Sarah, however, wasn't ready to give up. "All these years, you were just a burden, living off Dad. Now that you have this," she waved around, "you owe us, especially me." Mark chimed in, attempting to pacify the situation. "Sarah, let's not—" But she cut him off, her voice rising with every word. "No, Dad, she's been freeloading all her life. Now she needs to pay it back." My heart ached seeing the venom in my daughter's eyes, the daughter I raised with love and care. "Sarah, I always wanted the best for you, but this isn't the way." Richard, witnessing the entire scene, stepped forward, his presence commanding attention. "Anna is my daughter, and this is her home now. She owes nothing to anyone." Mark, sensing he was fighting a losing battle, tried to save face. "Anna, think about it. For Sarah's sake, we can start over." Sarah scoffed. "Start over? I just want what's owed to me." I took a deep breath. "This mansion, this wealth, it's not a ticket for redemption, Mark. And Sarah, it's not a bank for your entitlement. You both made choices, and now you'll have to live with them." Mark nodded, the weight of defeat evident in his posture. Sarah, on the other hand, was seething. "This isn't over, Mom," she hissed, storming out of the mansion with Mark trailing behind. And as the grand doors closed behind them, I realized that even amidst all this luxury, the most valuable thing I had gained was the strength to stand up for myself. The nights after Mark and Sarah's visit were restless ones. Despite the soft, plush bed and the quiet stillness of the mansion, my mind kept revisiting our confrontation. The hurtful words, the raw emotions, everything played on a loop. It was on one such night that Richard knocked gently on my door. "Anna," he began hesitantly, "there's something I've been meaning to share." I sat up, sensing the gravity of the conversation ahead. "Go on," I murmured, signaling for him to sit beside me. Richard took a deep breath. "When your mother told me about you, she didn't just reveal your existence. She told me about Mark and how he treated you." I looked at him, a little taken aback. "Why didn't you say something before?" He sighed. I wanted to, but your mother made me promise not to intervene. She believed that you needed to find your own path, your own strength. A wave of memories flooded over me. All the times I had felt isolated and trapped in my marriage, wanting an escape. I whispered, "It was so hard, Dad." Richard placed a comforting hand over mine. "I know, Anna, and it hurt me every day to stay away, knowing what you were going through." The room grew silent for a few moments, filled only with the weight of our shared pain. It was Richard who broke the silence. "Your mother told me something else too." I turned to look at him, curious. "What?" "About Sarah. How she was growing distant from you, taking after Mark." My eyes welled up at the mention of my daughter. She used to be my little girl, always clinging to me. I don't know when and how it all changed. Richard sighed deeply. "Anna, children sometimes get influenced by the environment they grow up in, but you tried your best. You can't blame yourself for how Sarah turned out." "But she's my daughter," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "And she still is," Richard said firmly, wiping away my tears. "But sometimes, Anna, we have to let our children make their own mistakes, learn their own lessons." The conversation with Richard was an eye-opener. It wasn't just about Sarah, but about me. For years, I'd believed that my self-worth was tied to my relationship with Mark and Sarah. That night, with Richard's words echoing in my ears, I realized that my journey, my story, was about finding my own self-worth. The sun was bright, casting a warm, golden hue over everything. I woke up feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Today was special. I was reopening the community center in my town, turning it into a haven for people who needed guidance and support. Richard was already there when I arrived, overseeing the last-minute preparations. "Anna," he greeted, extending a hand. "You look radiant today." I smiled. "Thank you, Richard. Today feels right, doesn't it?" He nodded, looking around the bustling hall. "A fresh start for many." "The community needs this," I replied. "A place of hope." As we cut the ribbon and welcomed the first batch of visitors, the sense of fulfillment was overwhelming. Youngsters seeking guidance, women looking for a fresh start after facing personal challenges, and even elderly folks seeking companionship. The community center was soon buzzing with activity. Richard, seeing my contented expression, whispered, "Proud of you, Anna." As days turned into weeks, the center became the heart of the community. Richard hosted personal development sessions, and I organized workshops, sharing my story, hoping it would inspire others to find their strength. One evening, as the sun set, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink, I stood at the balcony of the mansion, reflecting on the journey, the pain, the betrayals, the moments of despair, all leading to this moment of contentment. Richard joined me, his presence comforting as always. "You've come a long way, Anna," he said, looking into the horizon. "I have," I replied, "but I couldn't have done it without you." He smiled. "Here's to new beginnings." As we stood there, side by side, it was clear that the future was promising. The past was just that, the past. It was time for new memories, new experiences, and most importantly, new beginnings.
The sun was setting as I pulled up in front of the familiar brick house that had been my childhood home. It had been years since I last set foot in this place, and while the structure itself hadn't changed, the aura surrounding it felt different. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the car. The familiar scent of the garden flowers greeted me. I approached the front door, clutching the small suitcase in my hand. Before I could knock, the door swung open, revealing my mother. She looked older than I remembered. Her once vibrant hair had grayed considerably, and lines had formed on her face. There was an air of tiredness about her. "Lucy," she said flatly, her eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Mother," I responded, equally devoid of emotion. Without a word, she turned her back to me and walked inside, expecting me to follow. I hesitated for a moment, then entered. The interior of the house was much as I remembered, though slightly more cluttered. I set my suitcase down in the living room and looked around. The photos on the mantelpiece caught my attention. Pictures of my brother, Alex, his wife, Vanessa, and their various trips and celebrations. I was conspicuously absent from these memories. "Your room is just as you left it," Mother said, interrupting my thoughts. "Thank you," I replied, trying to maintain civility. She looked at me for a moment, her gaze cold and calculating. "Now that you're back, I expect you to contribute financially." I wasn't surprised by the demand. "How much do you need?" I asked. She named a sum, larger than I had anticipated. I bit back a retort. "Fine, I'll transfer it to your account every month." She nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Alex and Vanessa live next door now," she added after a pause. I hadn't been informed of this piece of news. "That's good to know," I said, unsure of how to feel about living so close to Alex and Vanessa. Their relationship with me had always been strained. "Vanessa is a good woman," Mother said, a hint of defensiveness in her tone. "She's been a great help since your father passed." "I'm sure she has," I said, keeping my tone neutral. There was an uncomfortable silence. I could feel the weight of years of unsaid words and emotions between us. "I should unpack," I said finally, breaking the silence. Mother simply nodded and walked away, leaving me alone in the living room. The first night back in my old room was filled with a whirlwind of memories. The pale blue walls, the rickety bookshelf, the posters I'd hung up during my teenage years, everything seemed untouched by time. As I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind wandered to the past. It felt strange being back here, surrounded by echoes of a time when things seemed simpler. I remembered the days when I used to sit on this very bed, confiding my dreams and hopes to my father. He was always my rock, always encouraging me to chase my ambitions, no matter how far-fetched they might have seemed. I recalled a particular evening when I was around 15. I was feeling dejected, upset over a comment my mother had made about my appearance. I remembered coming to my room, tears streaming down my face, when my father walked in. "Lucy," he had said, sitting down next to me. "Why the tears?" "It's Mom," I'd sniffled. "She said I look like her when she was my age, but she's just being kind. I saw her photos, Dad. She was beautiful." He'd looked at me, his eyes full of compassion. "Your mother was, and still is, a striking woman. But beauty is more than just looks, Lucy. It's the kindness you show, the love you give, and the way you treat others. And in those aspects, you shine brighter than anyone I know." I'd smiled weakly, taking comfort in his words. "Thanks, Dad." He had hugged me tightly, whispering, "Always remember, you're capable of great things." Shaking off the memory, I decided to go downstairs and make some tea. The house was silent, with only the faint ticking of the wall clock. As I passed the living room, I noticed a bunch of old family albums stacked on the coffee table. Curiosity got the better of me, and I began flipping through them. There were many photos of my mother in her youth, looking radiant and confident. Photos of family trips, holidays, and gatherings. My brother, Alex, prominently featured in most of them, always the center of attention with his charming smile and good looks. It was evident he was the apple of my mother's eye. As I continued to turn the pages, I stumbled upon a photo of Alex and me during one of our rare moments of camaraderie, probably taken during a family vacation. I smiled, remembering the day when we built sandcastles together, competing to see whose would last the longest against the tide. Lost in thought, I was startled when I heard a voice behind me. "Going down memory lane?" I turned to see Alex standing there, looking much the same as he did in the photos, albeit a few years older and with a touch more arrogance in his eyes. "Alex," I said, surprised. "Didn't expect to see you here so early." He shrugged, leaning against the doorway. "Thought I'd check on Mom and, of course, see how you're settling in." I hesitated for a moment. "I'm doing fine. It's good to be back." Alex smirked. "I'm sure it is, especially with Mom's finances coming to your rescue." I frowned, not appreciating the insinuation. "I'm here because I want to be close to family. Not for any other reason. He raised an eyebrow. Sure. Anyway, just wanted to remind you not to forget about the money you promised Mom. I sighed. I won't forget. Alex nodded, his gaze lingering on the family albums. Good. Just remember who's really taking care of things around here. With that, he turned and left, leaving me feeling a mix of annoyance and sadness. Time seemed to go by slowly in that house. The days blurred into one another, with the routine being much the same. Every morning, I'd wake up, make breakfast for Mom and myself, and then work from home. I had hoped the atmosphere would improve, but it only seemed to grow tenser. One evening, after a particularly grueling day of work, I decided to treat the family to a home-cooked meal. I had always found solace in cooking, and it felt good to do something productive that wasn't tied to my job. As the aroma of roasted chicken and fresh-baked bread wafted through the house, I hoped it would be an evening of peace and unity. When dinner was ready, I set the table and called everyone. Alex and Vanessa had been frequenting our house almost daily since my return. I never really understood their constant presence, but I tried to maintain civility for my mother's sake. Vanessa was the first to comment as she took her seat, her eyes scanning the dishes. Oh, a home-cooked meal? This is new. I thought you were too busy being a career woman to bother with such things. Suppressing my annoyance, I replied, I thought it'd be nice for a change. Hope you like it. Alex chuckled. Let's hope it tastes better than it looks. Mom, always keen on avoiding confrontations, quickly intervened. Let's just eat. It smells lovely, dear. Dinner was a quiet affair, with only the clinking of cutlery breaking the silence. I was relieved when it was over, but just as I began collecting the dishes, Vanessa spoke up. You know, Lucy, it's such a shame. A woman of your age, with no husband or children, all that money and success, but no one to share it with. Feeling my cheeks heat up, I retorted, I'm content with my life choices, Vanessa. Not everyone measures success by the same yardstick. Alex smirked. Well, some people just aren't cut out for family life. Maybe it's for the best. The sting of their words was hard to ignore, but I took a deep breath, reminding myself that I had promised Dad I would look after Mom. Mom, however, seemed oblivious to the tension. By the way, dear, she began, her eyes on me. The money you gave me last month is running low, and with the additional expenses... She trailed off, glancing meaningfully at Alex and Vanessa. Vanessa smiled sweetly. Oh, it's so hard to manage finances these days. Prices have gone up so much. But we appreciate your help, Lucy. Feeling cornered and irritated, I replied, I'll see what I can do, Mom, but you need to budget better. I can't keep bailing everyone out. Alex's face darkened. You stay in this house, eat our food. It's the least you can do. The room was thick with tension. I wished I could just walk away, but I was trapped in this situation, bound by my promise to Dad. Each day, it became clearer to me that my brother and Vanessa saw me as nothing more than a cash cow. Mom, caught in the middle, seemed to bend under their influence, relying more and more on me for financial help. I often felt like an outsider, isolated and unwelcome in my own home. One evening, as I was returning from a walk, I overheard a conversation between Alex and Vanessa in the garden. They didn't notice me, and their voices carried clearly in the stillness of the evening. I don't understand why she's still here, Vanessa said, with a note of annoyance. She has her own house, her own life. Why did she have to come back? Alex sighed. She's here because of Mom. But don't worry, once we get enough money, we can finally buy that house we saw downtown. We just need to be patient. Patient? It's been months, and she's so stingy. She should be giving us more, considering she's living here. Alex chuckled. She's not going to stay here forever. We need to make the best of it while she's still here. Maybe we can convince Mom to ask her for more money. Hearing their scheming made my blood boil. The audacity of them, discussing me like I was some kind of intruder in my family home. But it was Vanessa's next words that truly hurt. Honestly, I don't know what she does with all that money. It's not like she has a family or anything, just a lonely old woman with no life. I felt a lump forming in my throat. The hurtful words cut deep. Without making my presence known, I quietly retreated to my room, feeling both angry and humiliated. That night, dinner was a tense affair. Alex and Vanessa exchanged furtive glances, while Mom seemed lost in her thoughts. I kept my head down, picking at my food. Then, as if on cue, Mom cleared her throat and said, "Lucy, dear, we've been thinking. With all the expenses and everything, we were hoping you could contribute a bit more." My gaze snapped up to meet hers. "More? Mom, I'm already giving you so much." Alex interjected, "You live in this house. You should pay your fair share. I've got my own family to look after." Vanessa smirked. "It's only fair, isn't it?" Feeling cornered, I took a deep breath, trying to remain calm. "I came here to support you, Mom, not to fund Alex and Vanessa's lifestyle. This was Dad's house too, remember?" Alex's face turned red with anger. "How dare you? This is our family home. You left. You chose your career over us." Vanessa added, "You're lucky we even let you stay here. Maybe it's time for you to leave." I stared at them in disbelief. "Is this what you all want?" Mom looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Maybe it's best, dear." Tears filled my eyes. I felt like a stranger, rejected by my own family. "Fine," I said, standing up. "I'll leave, but I'm done supporting you financially." The doorbell rang, breaking the tranquility of my morning. I opened the door, not expecting to see my mother there, especially after everything that had transpired. But there she was, her posture upright, an intense look in her eyes. "Lucy," she said sharply, without a hint of warmth, "I need to speak with you." I raised an eyebrow, but let her in, curious about what had brought her to my door. Once inside, she wasted no time. "You know your father would be turning in his grave if he knew how you were treating me, abandoning your family in their time of need." I stared at her, trying to keep my emotions in check. "This isn't about what Dad would have wanted. This is about how you and the rest have treated me since I got back. I've been nothing but supportive, and you've given my hard-earned money to Alex and Vanessa while they disrespect me in my own home." She scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you're so high and mighty just because you have some money now. It doesn't change who you are. You owe us, especially after promising your father you'd look after us." "I promised Dad I'd look after you, not be taken advantage of," I retorted, trying to keep calm. "All I asked for was a bit of respect in return, but it seems that's too much for you, Alex and Vanessa." My mother's eyes flashed with anger. "You know what? It's easier living with Alex and Vanessa. They might have their flaws, but at least they don't throw their money in my face and try to act superior." A small smile crept onto my face. "You made your choice, Mom. If that's the life you want, so be it." She glared at me, fury evident in her gaze. "Remember this moment, Lucy. Remember the day you turned your back on your family." "I remember the day my family turned their back on me," I replied calmly, standing my ground. "You made your choice, Mom. Now face the consequences." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I sighed, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. One evening, as I was trying to divert my mind by watching a movie, my phone buzzed. It was Alex. "Why aren't you answering Mom's calls? Do you even care anymore?" The text read. I paused for a moment before responding. "Alex, I've always cared, but there are limits to what one can tolerate." He replied instantly, "You're overreacting. Just because of a few comments? Grow up, Lucy." "It's not just a few comments, Alex. It's years of feeling unappreciated, disrespected, and used. I've decided to distance myself for my own sanity." There was a brief pause before he responded. "So you're abandoning us. Nice." "No," I typed. "I'm not abandoning anyone, but I'm setting boundaries. I won't be an ATM or a punching bag anymore." Another buzz. It was Vanessa. "Lucy, we're family. We should stick together. Don't let your pride ruin everything." It was clear that they were talking to each other, probably sitting together, discussing how best to handle the Lucy situation. I sighed. "Vanessa, it's not about pride. It's about self-respect." I also called my bank the next day, ensuring that there were no joint accounts or any financial ties with my family. It was tough, but it felt necessary. A week later, I met up with an old friend, Carla, who I hadn't seen in years. As we caught up over coffee, I poured out everything, from my father's death to the recent confrontations. Carla listened patiently, occasionally nodding or frowning. When I finished, she took a deep breath. "Lucy, you did the right thing. Family is important, but it's not a license to be mistreated." I nodded, sipping my coffee. "It's just hard, you know. I keep thinking about the good times, the moments when we were close." Carla placed her hand over mine. "It's okay to mourn the relationship you wish you had, but you've got to protect yourself too." Several months had passed since the incident with my mother. Life had resumed its regular pace, but with a notable calmness. The lack of drama felt refreshing, almost rejuvenating. My phone buzzed less frequently, and when it did, it was often messages from friends or work emails, nothing stress-inducing. One afternoon, after wrapping up a long meeting, I decided to head to my favorite coffee shop. As I stood in line, I noticed a familiar face seated in the corner. It was Vanessa, and she looked a shadow of her former self, hunched over and absorbed in thought. Beside her, Alex seemed deep in conversation on the phone, his face strained. Feeling a pang of curiosity, I quietly ordered my drink and took a seat nearby, ensuring I was out of their immediate sight. I couldn't help but overhear snippets of Alex's conversation. "I know, but the loan was rejected. We tried everything." Alex's voice was desperate. I felt a jolt of surprise. Financial troubles? I sipped my coffee, not wanting to eavesdrop, but it was hard to tune out their obvious distress. After Alex hung up, Vanessa said, "What are we going to do now? We have so many bills, and without your job—" "We'll figure something out," Alex interrupted, rubbing his temples. I sat there for a while, taking in the scene. There was a twisted sense of satisfaction in seeing them struggle. Was it karma? I had always been their safety net, and now they were facing the realities of life without one. Just as I was about to leave, Vanessa's eyes met mine. I braced myself for a confrontation, but all she did was offer a weak smile. "Lucy." "Vanessa," I replied, nodding. "I didn't expect to see you here," she murmured. "Likewise," I responded. There was an awkward pause. I could tell she wanted to say something, but the words seemed to evade her. Finally, she whispered, "Life's been hard. We're facing a lot of financial issues." I nodded slowly. "I'm sorry to hear that." Alex, realizing I was there, interjected, "Lucy, can you help us out? Just one last time?" I took a deep breath. The old Lucy would have said yes immediately, but this was the new Lucy, the one who valued self-respect over appeasement. "I'm sorry, Alex. You both need to figure it out on your own." Vanessa looked down, tears forming in her eyes. "We're family, Lucy. Can't you see we're struggling?" "Yes, Vanessa, I see. But I'm not responsible for your choices. Maybe this is a chance for you both to learn and grow." Alex looked at me with disbelief. "So that's it? You're just going to watch us sink?" I stood up, ready to leave. "It's not about watching you sink. It's about letting you learn to swim on your own." It was a crisp morning when I sat in my favorite cafe, the sunlight streaming through the window warming my face. Over a cup of freshly brewed coffee, I was lost in thoughts about the whirlwind of a year it had been. My phone buzzed, pulling me out of my reverie. There was a message from Katie, an old school friend and a distant relative of my mother's. "Hey Lucy, long time. Not sure if you've heard, but things have changed a lot back here. Your mom, Vanessa, and Alex had to sell the house. They're now in a rented apartment. To be honest, it doesn't seem great. They're constantly at each other's throats. Your mom mentioned they're mounting debts. I just thought you should know. Hope you're well." I typed back, "Thanks for letting me know, Katie. Hope you're doing well." I paid for my coffee and walked back to my apartment, the city sounds in the backdrop. Once home, I found a note slid under my door. Curious, I picked it up. It was from my mother. "Lucy, I don't know how to say this. We're in a tight spot. Vanessa and Alex's habits haven't changed, and our debts have piled up. We had to let go of the house. I know we haven't been on the best terms, but I was wondering if you could help? Love, Mom." A rush of emotions washed over me. For a brief moment, guilt and empathy battled within. But then, clarity dawned. I had already paid my dues, both emotionally and financially. It was time for them to face the music of their own choices. Sitting down, I penned a short reply. Mom, I received your note. I'm sorry to hear about the situation. However, I've chosen a path of self-care and well-being. I've done my part in the past, and now it's time for you both to take responsibility. I won't be able to assist financially or otherwise. Please understand. Take care, Lucy.